A lot of injuries to focus on heading into Week 3. Hey, how are you, folks? Jason Horowitz. Glad to be with you here on CBSSports.com. It's Power Projections, all part of the Fantasy Football Series, presented by Norton, because every click matters, getting you ready for Week 3 of the NFL season. Let's bring in our CBSSports.com senior fantasy football writer, Dave Richard, to break down the projections for this weekend. And Dave, let's start with the injuries and how they affect how things are going to play out. You talk about running backs, LT, Westbrook, Portis, Barber, Jamal Lewis. All these guys are questionable for the game heading in. Injury reports obviously coming out today on Friday. How does that affect the projections that you guys are making?
Well, obviously we're going to change the projections that we make, and that's why fantasy owners can get the latest from us late Friday evening and into Saturday to figure out who's going to do what, and that's why we do the projections, is because one day these guys look like they're going to play and the next day they're not. The big surprise on the list is Portis, who was limited in practice on Thursday, and then on Friday did not practice. He's listed as questionable for the game. We're not sure which way is the right way for him to go for fantasy owners, so your best bet is to go get Liddell Betts and or Marcus Mason off of waivers. Obviously, it's a tasty matchup going up against those Lions in Detroit. They can't stop the run. So if Portis can't do it, Betts might be in for a real nice day statistically. Mason, too.
Dave, how do the injuries, though, affect? Obviously, the numbers change when you find out if a guy is going to play or not going to play, but a lot of times we don't find that out until Sunday. So how does that change if a guy is questionable, maybe hampering with a hamstring or an ankle or whatever it may be? Do you take those numbers down even if these may play on Sunday?
Yeah, let's look at the case of Brian Westbrook as an example. Westbrook is questionable. There's a report out there that says that he's going to play. But let's be honest, is Philadelphia really going to run him 25 times when they've got LaShawn McCoy on the roster? They're not going to do that, Jason. You know that as well as I do. So when we project Westbrook this week, we're not giving him the entire workload, and we're giving LaShawn McCoy his fair share. And, yes, that does bring down Westbrook's potential for the week and his projections for the week. The numbers aren't nearly as good as what you'd expect from him in a matchup against Kansas City. The Chiefs' run defense, they haven't been that good. They're going to be without linebacker Derek Johnson. They're going to have a hard time moving the ball on offense. This would normally be a week where we'd project well over 100 total yards and a touchdown for Brian Westbrook, and now we're not going to be able to do it.
Let's talk about a couple of running backs you're projecting good numbers for both. Willis McGahee, Ray Rice, and what has been a prolific offense through 2 weeks, to say the least, for Baltimore. How do you go about projecting which guy is going to have a better week in and week out? Is it, because this week you've got McGahee higher on the projections, but Rice with more yards. It's projecting that one touchdown, Dave.
Yeah, the touchdowns obviously play a huge factor in projections, and one of the things that I might recommend to people that look at our projections is to almost ignore the touchdown factor. Look at the yardage to see who's got the better chance. Now listen, I think Ray Rice is going to have more carries than Willis McGahee. It's gone that way for much of the season so far. Rice is pretty much their starting running back, the guy that they use between the 20s, maybe even inside the 20 to the 10. But once they get inside that 10-yard line, they've had a penchant for going to Willis McGahee. And when McGahee gets in there, he finds the end zone. So what they're doing in Baltimore is they're limiting McGahee's reps but still giving him a meaningful role in the offense, while Ray Rice still gets the starting nod, still gets upwards of 20 touches a game, just doesn't have the chance to get touchdowns. And we knew that with Ray Rice going in. We just thought that it might have been LeRon McClain getting the touchdowns, not Willis McGahee. It's been McGahee who's doing it. Now that he's got a great matchup this week, you just have to keep rolling with him. He's done very well in the past against Cleveland.
Both guys are starts this weekend, Dave. I want to ask you about a couple of quarterbacks. You've got Carson Palmer listed as the 23rd projected quarterback in terms of fantasy points this weekend. We've got Mark Sanchez on CBSSports.com projected as the 9th rated quarterback. Which guy has the better opportunity to flip that, meaning who has a better chance to be better in Carson Palmer's case or worse in Mark Sanchez's case?
I love Mark Sanchez's matchup against Tennessee. The Titans secondary, they've got some good players, but they're a little over-aggressive, and they have a hard time defending the deep ball. We've seen that much over 2 weeks. Antonio Holmes had a big game against them. Andre Johnson had a big game against them. And the quarterbacks that they've faced this year, both of them, have thrown at least 350 passing yards in their matchup.
But both those quarterbacks are established quarterbacks, Dave.
See,
Schaub and Roethlisberger.
Right. Well, that's why we're not projecting 350 yards for Mark Sanchez, Jason. We're going to give him under 300 yards, but that's still pretty good for him. He should be able to find the end zone through the air, too. And the Jets are going to have to throw the ball because no one's been able to run on Tennessee. The Jets have Thomas Jones. He's been okay so far this season, not that great. Leon Washington is a guy who's been stepping up for them. He will catch the ball out of the backfield. He'll make an impact in Sanchez's stat line. That's why we like Sanchez better than Palmer, who's struggled in the past against Pittsburgh. He's going to have to deal with a brutal pass rush against them. I don't know if his offensive line can handle it. I don't know if his receivers, Lavernius Coles has really underachieved so far this year. Chris Henry's done the same. Not sure if his receivers are really going to do as well as he'd like them to. He's a good quarterback. He's just stuck on a team that's running into a tough matchup.
All right, we'll see how that one plays out real quickly. You mentioned receivers. You've got Chancey Stuckey listed high. Take a look at this list, guys. 13 through 18 here. You've got some good players, or some players that you're surprised to see on a list here this high, Dave. You got Hines Ward, Nate Burleson, Devin Hester, Chancey Stuckey, Malcolm Kelly. They're all projected to be number 2 receivers this week. Which 2 do you like the most? Obviously Stuckey based on what you said about Sanchez, but which 2 do you like the most on the other guys?
Well, Nate Burleson is one that's really high on my list. Jamie Eisenberg and I actually disagree on Burleson this week. Here's my case for him. You've got T.J. Hushmanzada on the other side of the field. Hushmanzada has been pretty easy to cover, and I think Chicago's going to have an easy time taking care of Hoosh. Burleson, on the other end, has better speed. He was targeted 6 times by Seneca Wallace last week in the second half. Seneca Wallace effectively is going to be the starter there. If it's Matt Hasselbeck, all the better for Burleson. I think he's got a chance to beat Chicago deep. Chicago hasn't been great against the deep ball. They did okay against Antonio Holmes last week. Greg Jennings had a big 50-yard touchdown against them in Week 1. I actually have Burleson ranked ahead of T.J. Hushmanzada in my rankings as a low-end number 2 fantasy receiver this week. I think he actually has a shot at a very decent game. And as for the projections and why these guys are where they are, we've got them scoring touchdowns. That's another impact of projecting touchdowns for players on our site and what it does for them in our projection rankings.
Absolutely. Dave, Richard, thank you very much. So we look forward to hearing from you Sunday on Fantasy Football Today.
I can't wait, Jason. I know it's going to be another great show with you and Brian Jones and Jamie Eisenberg. I'm just glad to be a part of it.
Yeah, there you go. Way to kiss up to everybody. Love it, Dave. Appreciate it.
Take care, folks.
All right, that'll do it for the Power Projections, part of the Fantasy Football series here on CBSSports.com, presented by Norton, because every click matters. For Dave, Richard, I'm Jason Horowitz. Good luck this week, folks. Take care.